There is unprecedented controversy in Scotland right now over the Hate Crimes Bill. Part 2 of that bill creates new offences of using abusive language to stir up hatred. Now, the Christian Institute is part of a campaign called Free to Disagree, where we are campaigning against Part 2, working with Jim Sillars, former deputy leader of the SNP, the National Secular Society, the Adam Smith Institute and others. Now, I've been involved with a lot of free speech campaigns over the last couple of decades, but I've never been involved with one which has taken off quite this quickly. The number of public figures and organisations who've spoken out against the Part 2 stirring up offences is incredible. You have judges, lawyers, policemen, actors, feminists, LGBT activists, authors, the lot. And MSPs from almost every party except the Greens, have also expressed concerns about the impact Part 2 will have on freedom of speech. Now, I've got with me today Sam Webster, well known to Christian Institute supporters. He is our in-house solicitor. Sam is famous, of course, for his Supreme Court victories in the named person case in Scotland and also the Ashes case. So, and Sam, also you frequently advise street preachers. Again, every case that you've run, I think, involving a Christian street preacher, you've been successful. So you're a good person to talk to about the law and its impact on freedom of speech. So let me put the question to you. As Christians, of course, we're against being abusive and against being hateful. So what do Christians have to worry about from this law?
I think the first thing to say is the lack of definition in the bill. The word abusive isn't defined. We know that a huge range of things can amount to abusive in the minds of the general public. Someone feels offended or slightly insulted in some way. Very easy for them to go off to a police officer, phone the police and say, so-and-so has been abusive, has acted in an abusive manner towards me. And that starts an investigation rolling. So I think that's the first thing to say. But also the lack of any requirement that the person needs to have intended to have caused some form of harm to the individual that they've spoken to. So I think that's the most concerning thing, the threshold. And the lack of free speech protections as well on top of that.
So we're talking about the word abusive. The word is already used in some existing laws in Scotland, Section 38 of the Criminal Justice and Licensing Act. But there was a case a couple of years ago, wasn't there, where that law was used against a man who stood outside a church holding up a placard which said, "God hates the Kirk." Now, it's not the sort of thing that you or I would do. And of course, Christian Institute supporters will have a range of views about the position of the Kirk. But leaving aside those specifics, it seems quite striking to me that the court found, actually, and affirmed on appeal, that that placard was abusive. I mean, shouldn't people be allowed to say if they hate something, an institution or an idea?
People should be allowed to express their opinions. And I think that the law you referred to in that case, I think Section 38, we often refer to it as that, Section 38. Not only does the law require that there must be threatening or abusive behaviour or acted in that sort of manner, but also on top of that, that there should be an intent to cause fear or alarm, or recklessness as to whether one's behaviour should cause fear or alarm. So if problems should arise with such a law where the threshold's higher, how much more so are we going to see problems with this new bill before the Scottish Parliament on incitement?
Yes, I mean, I start to wonder about preaching, sermons in churches, sermons which are often streamed on the internet. What if a church has a series where they do preach on those passages of the Bible that make clear that God hates certain sins? Do you think that Christians should be concerned about what could happen to them if this law comes in this form?
I don't think they should be concerned about preaching the whole counsel of God. And I don't feel concerned that preachers are going to end up in court prosecuted for sermons that they've they've preached. What I would be more concerned about is this bill, if it becomes law, will give zealots, anti-religious zealots, a charter to cause trouble, stir up problems for churches and preachers, just making a spurious allegation to the police, something that would start an investigation. Hopefully it wouldn't go anywhere. But we shouldn't have laws that allow people to do that in the first place. We're talking about religious freedom of expression here, things which, you know, should be protected under fundamental human rights, and we shouldn't therefore have laws that conflict with those fundamental human rights or give, you know, as I say, a charter for those who want to stir up trouble to do so.
Yes, because everybody knows about so-called cancel culture and the really quite vicious treatment that can be meted out to people who refuse to express approval for certain ideas about identity politics and so on. But of course, in cancel culture, the worst that can happen to you, I mean, you may find that a public meeting you've agreed to speak at is cancelled, or conceivably you might lose your job. But isn't it right that under this, if an activist makes a complaint to the police and the police take it forward, you could ultimately find yourself in jail? Is that right?
Well, in extremis, this offence, Section 5 and Section 3 offences of the Act, would, at its highest, on indictment, conviction on indictment, carry a 7-year prison sentence. So yes, but even a case which goes simply to a summary hearing, a conviction on summary, could still land up to 12 months in prison. So yes, it is a custodial sentence it carries, potentially.
And people are going to be responding to that threat, aren't they, by censoring themselves. That's one of the problems with this, is that the climate of fear, the chilling effect, as they call it, and so people self-censor. And I think a lot of people are worried about the gagging effect on churches, and as you've already hinted at, there are plenty of people who are quite prepared to use the law and to use the police to try and settle an argument. And so, for example, I mentioned that the Greens are the only party not to have spoken out against this legislation. The leader of the Green Party, Patrick Harvey, famously in 2006 wrote to the police when the Cardinal Archbishop of Glasgow preached a sermon, a quite moderate sermon, against same-sex civil partnerships. So that's the kind of thing that we are likely to see, whether it makes its way all the way to a conviction or not.
Yeah, quite.
It's the act of calling the police, isn't it? That
we have, yes, and we've seen similar things, I suppose, south of the border. Bishop of Chester, referral made to, I think, Cheshire Constabulary over something he said some years back, and others besides. You know, that's under existing public order legislation south of the border. When you pass these laws, they will be used by activists. May not go anywhere ultimately, but as I said earlier, I think, you know, when you then do legislate for an offence where the threshold is so low, there's a risk that these things could get traction, and it could be some time before the individual who's subject to that investigation knows that they're in the clear. And I suppose the damage to people's employment in the meantime, and reputational damage, etc. So, you know, in a democracy which values free speech, we shouldn't be legislating in that sort of way. It's irresponsible.
And it's, of course, I mean, not just Christians who will be gagged. People's minds will automatically go to the example of the author J.K. Rowling.
Absolutely.
Who's been quite clear that she thinks that women are women, which seems to me a perfectly respectable view, but she's come under incredible attacks. This is the kind of law which could be used. In fact, I'm right in saying, aren't I, that if this bill is passed in this form, Part 2 will mean that Scotland is the first place in the UK to outlaw criticising trans people, and that there's no free speech clause. Is that right? Right.
So, I mean, you raise a very important point, because obviously in the context of J.K. Rowling, things that, for example, people like her have said, and you're absolutely right, with this particular offence, it will be the first case in the United Kingdom, any part of the United Kingdom, where a substantive criminal offence has been created, which directly affects speech in relation to the transgender issue. So in England we have various public order offences, but they're not circumscribed explicitly in relation to the transgender issue. Certainly you can get a higher sentence if it's found that having committed such an offence south of the border, it was motivated in some way by hostility to transgender people. But no, this, as you say, is the first case in the UK where treatment of transgender identity is part of the substantive definition of the offence itself. So yes, it comes at a time when obviously there is very much a kickback in public discourse on this issue and the importance of freedom of expression.
Now we keep making the comparison between the law in Scotland as proposed and the law in England, and it's worth saying, I mean, I remember when the Parliament at Westminster was bringing in stirring up offences on the grounds of religion or belief, we actually engaged with SNP members of Parliament, and we were very grateful to them that they came to Parliament, to the House of Commons in January 2006 and voted with us to raise the thresholds of the stirring up offence and to insert a really very robust free speech clause. And so it seems striking that the SNP in Scotland are proposing a law which has much lower thresholds, a much wider reach, and is much more dangerous than the law which they voted for in England. In response to the barrage of criticism that the Scottish Government has had to this legislation, one of the things it's keen on saying is, well, there are free speech clauses, you've got nothing to worry about, but you think that that doesn't go far enough?
Well, it's true, there are free speech clauses in the bill, but there's still things to worry about. So what have we got? We've got two free speech clauses. One makes it clear that discussion or criticism of religious beliefs or practices is not a criminal offence. But that falls short of what we've got, for example, in England and Wales, where the free speech protection there goes beyond simply discussing or criticising, but even ridiculing, abusing beliefs, not believers, but belief systems, talking in strong terms about it. The free speech clause in England and Wales makes it clear that is not a criminal offence. So we've got something of a much narrower nature in Scotland. On top of that, the free speech clause protects the criticism of religious belief and conduct, but also it doesn't protect the criticism of a lack of religious belief. But the actual criminal offence criminalises inciting hatred on grounds of a lack of religious belief. So there is certainly a clear lacuna there. What else have we got? Sexual orientation. We've got a free speech clause in this bill that would protect the right to discuss or criticise sexual conduct or practice. That's good, same as England and Wales, but what we don't have is a separate clause guaranteeing the right to criticise or discuss in strong terms marriage, for example, same-sex marriage, who are the rightful parties to a marriage. But we have such a clause in Northern Ireland, we have that in England, we have that in Wales. So we fall short there as well. And of course there is no free speech clause in this bill dealing with discussion about transgender identity issues at all. So not only are we the first part of the United Kingdom, Scotland would be, to have such an offence, but no free speech clause going with it.
And even if you had robust free speech clauses on all those grounds, you would still have the problem that the basic offence is drawn so widely that it appears to confuse disagreement with hatred.
Yeah, no, quite. I mean, you don't want to rely upon free speech clauses. They're useful, they're good signposts to police and prosecutors, and they're good things for defendants, those accused of crimes, to use as part of their defence. But no, the terms of the actual offence, the basic terms of the offence, have got to be right in the first place. There's got to be a threshold that people can clearly understand. They can know whether or not, if they were to go about a particular course of conduct, whether that would be problematic or not. And it must be a threshold that protects free speech. There's no point trying to rely upon fundamental human rights and the right of free speech there. No, the actual terms of the offence itself must reflect the right to free speech. Acknowledging there must be ultimate limits in society on what you can say. We have laws on libel, we have laws that protect us from disorder on the streets, but we shouldn't have a law that simply protects people from being offended. Certainly in a democracy we shouldn't have that. Otherwise ideas would never get off the ground in the first place.
Yes, you have to have the right to dissent and to disagree from the dominant opinions of the day, the views of the powerful, or else society never progresses, we never learn. And
indeed, a development of the United Kingdom as a parliamentary democracy and of religious free speech has been about dissenters being prepared to dissent, raise their head above the parapet, take issue with the prevailing orthodoxy of the day. So we've got to have that. It's got to continue.
Now, people will be well familiar with the statue of Lady Justice. You'll find her on top of court buildings and the like, and she's holding up the scales of justice with one hand, and she's wearing a blindfold. And this reflects the concept that justice must be blind. And so it doesn't matter whether the person in court is powerful or not, whether they are wealthy or poor, that justice is applied evenly. Now, it seems to me that there are certain powerful lobby groups that seem quite adept at getting the police to do their bidding. Isn't that really one of the problems with this? This law will not be applied in an even way. There will be some groups who are more able to persuade the police to use the law against their opponents than others.
Well, I mean, that's clearly the case. If you criminalise speech in relation to particular issues, particular characteristics, so if sexual orientation, transgender identity are within the terms of the offence, then groups that campaign on those issues are going to have far more room to go to the authorities and allege that speech has been insightful in some way or inciting hatred. So that must happen. I mean, that is inevitable, I think, as a result of bills like this.
And is there any need for this law? I mean, surely people in Scotland are adequately protected already.
Well, I mean, we've got Section 38 of the Criminal Justice and Licence in Scotland Act 2010, which already has a very clearly defined offence relating to threatening or abusive behaviour. You've got to intend to stir up fear or alarm, cause fear or alarm, or be reckless as to whether one does so. I would suggest that such an offence is already there to be used to deal with behaviour that is goes beyond ordinary free speech.
And if somebody is trying to incite somebody else to commit a crime against someone, that's already unlawful. If they are harassing them, that's unlawful.
Indeed. And another thing, I mean, which I'm particularly exercised about this legislation for, is that this particular offence can be committed in a private dwelling place. So, again, in England and Wales, the incitement offences in England and Wales with sexual orientation or religion, it expressly says that the offence is not committed if the speech, the conduct takes place in a private dwelling place, and provided that behaviour can't be seen or heard by anyone outside that dwelling place or outside another dwelling place. So that's important. So
you can commit this in the privacy of your own home. You can invite a stranger for dinner.
Yes, indeed, and in the privacy of your own home, relaxed over the dinner table, have a discussion about things that are perhaps more controversial, as one perhaps does more in the privacy of one's own home. Perhaps not express yourself as elegantly and in such a nuanced way as one might in a more public place, and then find later that you've been misreported or alleged to have said something which could be construed as abusive on grounds of religion or sexual orientation or transgender identity, which is likely to stir up hatred. So, that could be reported to the police. Again, in a way that is a charter for those who want to cause problems to do so. Or perhaps, a child hears a parent say something in the privacy of their own home, again, maybe misreported, but repeats that to a teacher at school.
Yes.
My parent said this or whatever. But again, if the threshold for the offence is so low to start with, and speech can get caught that wouldn't be caught otherwise, that's concerning. That is quite worrying. And another thing that alarms me about this bill is it's Clause 6, what will be Section 6 of the bill, of the Act, when it becomes an Act. And that's the powers of search warrants, which the police have under the legislation. So, for example, if an officer has reasonable grounds for suspecting that the incitement offence has been committed, reasonable grounds for suspecting, not that there has been necessarily the commission of an offence, but reasonable grounds for suspecting, that police officer can go off to a sheriff or a justice of the peace, get a warrant to search the premises where he believes the offence has been committed. And that's powers to search and to obtain more evidence.
So he can take my mobile phone off me?
Well, he could search your private home if he believes that the offence has been committed.
So if I have Twitter on my phone and I follow J.K. Rowling, he can take my phone off me? And Indeed. So yes, I mean, it's not unusual to have rights, to get a warrant to search premises and to get evidence. But that, joined with the fact that there is a very low threshold for the offence to start with, this should not be the case, and that's worrying. And these low thresholds, I mean, let's just be clear. Do I have to have actually stirred up hatred or intended to stir up hatred to breach this offence?
No, just to be clear, threatening or abusive behaviour, and that includes words, you don't have to have intended to have stirred up hatred. It's simply enough that it's likely the hatred may have been stirred up. But that doesn't mean to say hatred has been stirred up. You don't have to prove that. The police don't have to prove that hatred has been stirred up as a result of your behaviour. So
that's a very subjective test. And in the current very political climate, I mean, really, this just incentivises people to overreact to other people's opinions, to accuse them of being abusive haters. Seems to me it would be enough,
Indeed.
At the very least, to prompt a police investigation.
Indeed, there's that, and also just the tendency for people then to self-censor for fear that actually whatever they say may land them in trouble, and that would be a tragedy, I think, for freedom of speech for people to do that. So we can't go there. We've got to see changes to this legislation.
So there are a lot of people who are concerned about this, not just Christians, but Christians are sometimes told they should keep their heads down and keep quiet about things. What would you say to Christians in Scotland who are concerned about these stirring up offences?
Whether they should keep their heads down, well, they certainly shouldn't do that. I think if we keep our heads down, our liberties will be taken from us, and by the time we get our act together to experience the consequences of that, I think it'll be too late to do anything. There is a window at the moment. Justice Committee is going to be looking at this legislation October onwards. It's going to be scrutinising it. There is a window here to raise these concerns with members of the Scottish Parliament. So yes, I would be urging CI supporters to be contacting their MSPs, telephoning them, arranging having a meeting with them, writing to them, raising these concerns. Look at the legislation, see what it actually says. So you understand the issues, and you can talk about them in an articulate way.
Well, Sam, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. If those of you watching would like to be kept up to date with developments on the Scottish Hate Crimes Bill, then do follow the Christian Institute via our website, christian.org.uk, and our various social media feeds. And also remember the Free to Disagree campaign, www.freetodisagree.scot. Thank you for watching today.